Hi there, this is Module 7 Video 3. In this video we're going to build our exercise programs view. So here we are in our UI project. I'm going to add a views folder here first of all. And for the purposes of this video we're going to need a container for the various views that comprise the main view that we're building, which is exercise programs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the implementation into three different views, I think. So one is of course the exercise programs view, which will be essentially a table view controller. And each cell in that table view will be our second view, which is an exercise program view. And then in order to show, status of loading the document, parsing it, and any errors that may have occurred while parsing it, I'm going to create a wrapper view around the exercise programs view. And I think I'm just going to call it host exercise programs host view. So we'll start there. Okay, so we're inheriting from our view controller base class, which I explained in the previous video. And in this case, our constructor actually takes the view model and then directly assigns it to our view model property, assuming it's not null. And I'm also setting some navigation info here. So because this is the top level view that the navigation controller will be given, it will look for this navigation info, and it will use this string here to set the title above, at the top of the screen, and then this makes sure that there's no back button, because that doesn't make sense in the home screen, of course. Now we need some logic to execute when we load the view so that we can set everything up. So let me write that. Okay, so here's the load logic. First of all, I'm setting up a couple of properties here for that background color and making sure that our edges don't extend over the navigation controller. And then I'm creating each of the controls that we're going to use. First of all, an activity indicator to show that to show the user that we're loading. And I start it straight away because we are currently loading, so the sooner we get that activity indicator on the screen, the better. We've got an error label for the kind of the primary message, and that's kind of centered on the screen, and it only has a single line, and believe it or not, you have to set lines to 0 to indicate that. And then we've got a more detailed error label at a smaller font size, which will appear underneath the error label, as you'll see shortly, also centered. And then we've got this exercise programs view, which is going to be the table view controller with all the exercise programs in it, but I've just stubbed it out for now, just to be a normal UI view controller. So we add all those views to this view, and then this is our first look at how we do the auto layout using the classes that we saw in the previous video. So essentially we call this constrain layout extension method on the view, and then we pass through this expression, and each component of this expression is specifying a constraint. So for example, here we're saying the center X position for the activity indicator view is the same as the center X position of this view. So that means it's centered horizontally and then likewise vertically. And most of them are fairly simple. So here error label is the left hand side of the error label is up against the left hand side of the view, but we add a little bit of spacing onto that. And similarly with the right, the detail error label has the same left as the error label, the same right as the error label, but its top is equal to the bottom of the error label plus a little bit of spacing, so it will appear underneath the error label. And then the exercise programs view just takes up the whole view, because essentially this won't be visible until we're loaded. And when we do load, we just want to kind of replace all these other controls with this main table view controller. So next we need some logic to execute when we load the view so that we can set up bindings and what have you. Okay, so here we're just establishing the bindings between the view objects in the view model. So in the first 4 cases, we're binding the status on the view model to the hidden property in each of the subviews, so that they're hidden in the appropriate circumstances. So for example, the activity indicator view should be hidden if we're not loading. So it's only visible while we're loading, and then the error label should be hidden if we're not in an error status. Detail error label is the same thing, and then the main exercise programs view should only be hidden if we're not loading or we're not. If we're loading or we're in an error status. And then these 2 examples are binding first of all the error text, and we kind of take the status and convert that into an appropriate message here. And second of all, we're binding the detailed error from the view model, which is the parse error, to the detail error label. So that all builds. Okay, so at this point we can swap our app delegate logic over to use that view rather than our dummy view. There we go, so now let's try running that. So it's unable to resolve that type for some reason. So let me have a look at that. Okay, so looking at the error message, I could see that it's just because we haven't registered the container service. Let's try again. There we go, so that's something at least. We've got the correct title, we've got what looks to be the correct message, although we can't expect iCloud documents to load at all on the simulator. That's a good start, and we may as well continue on with the other views before we bother to actually run it on the device. So the exercise programs view is what we'll look at next. Okay, so first of all here I'm setting up some properties on the table view so that it looks and behaves the way we want it to. Registering this class for reuse. So I've stubbed out this exercise program view just as a UI table view cell for now, and it's got a key property, field rather. And so I'm registering that with the table view and then setting up the separator color. And believe it or not, to avoid separators when there's no data, you have to assign an empty UI view. So that's why I'm doing that. And then we're setting up our table view source. So when the program's reactive collection on the view model changes, we create a new auto size table view source based on it. And I publish that so that I can set up some other observables here, observable pipelines here before connecting it. Now the first thing I do is bind it to our table view, to the source property on our table view, and then I look for whenever this changes and get the element selected observable from it, switch to that, and then cast whatever we get in that observable to the correct type. Then I subscribe to that to make sure that we're correctly setting the selected program on the view model according to what the user selects in the table view. And then I connect that so that these all become connected at that point. Now, the one thing missing here, or the main thing missing here, is the ability for the host view to know when the user clicks or the user touches a exercise program. This view itself can't instigate the navigation because it's not at the top level of in the navigation controller. It's hosted within another view, this host view. So essentially this view needs to tell the host view when the user touches an exercise program, or when the user wants to navigate to an exercise program would be a more accurate way to describe that. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so it's a bit of faffing about there, but essentially what I've got is this observable of UI view controller called navigation request, which I expose through a property, and that gets set up in this view.didLoad method, and I'm setting that to this observable here. So whenever the view model selected program property changes, I create this new view. Now, eventually, obviously, we're going to create a view based on our next main view, the second view that will be in the application, but that doesn't exist yet, so we can't do that. So I've commented that out, and instead I'm just creating this temp view, which just has a label in it with testing as the text. Now, importantly, I've got this clause here where the controller is not null. So it can be null in the case where where the selected program property gets set to null, in which case no navigation request would be raised. Now on top of that, I'm also listening to that same property where that should be is null. So where it is null, we deselect whatever selection is currently in the table view. And similarly, when the view first appears, we need to make sure that there's no selection, because remember, eventually the user will be able to select an exercise program and then go back. When they go back, this method will execute. So at that point, we should deselect any currently selected program. And I've found that doing this before this call here is crucial if you don't want to see the remnants of the old selection. If you do it the other way around, you can briefly see what table view cell was previously selected. So that's why I'm doing that before the call to the base class here. Now, in order to get this to compile, I had to flesh out this table view cell class a little bit more, not too much. I had to inherit from our helper class so that we've got the reactive support that we need, and consequently I had to define this constructor, which is the only constructor a table view cell needs, and these abstract methods needed to be overridden. So now we can build, but if we were to run this even on a device that was correctly set up, we wouldn't really expect to see much because this view is not fleshed out. So let's do that next. Okay, so there's the general gist. Creating the view involves setting the background color, setting the selected background view, which is the way, believe it or not, to set the background color of the cell, and you can use a kind of shared instance of a UI view, which is what I'm doing here. And setting the accessory view, as discussed in the previous video, we've got our own custom control to ensure that the accessory view has the correct color. So that's how we use that. Then I'm creating the controls and then adding to the content view. And constraining the layout just involves putting the name at the top and the duration underneath it. And then finally we create the bindings. There's only two bindings to set up between the name and the duration. So that should be fine. Let's see if that builds. By the way, if you're wondering whether I'm doing this all from memory, I'm not. Not only do I, have I done this several times for other projects, I do have some notes here to make sure I don't stuff up too much during this recording, because then it would be a bit frustrating to watch and to record. Now, the other thing I did temporarily in the exercise programs host view, I think I referred to .view. Yeah, so here I think that should be table view. And same when we lay it out. Now that it's a table view controller, it wasn't when I wrote this code. And here as well. Okay, so theoretically, we should be in a good state right now. So what I'm going to do is switch to running on my device and show you that running. So before we get to running the code on the device, I've realized that we need to set up entitlements and what have you, so that we can access iCloud when we're running on the device. For those of you who haven't done that before, I wanted to give you a rundown, because obviously you won't be able to use what I've set up because it's specific to my Apple ID. So you have to do this in your own Apple ID logon. So just to give you a quick rundown of what you need to do, you need first of all to visit this address here, log on with your Apple ID, and then click on this certificates option here. Go to the iCloud containers section, create an iCloud container. I've called it Workout Watch. These are the details here. Next of all, create an app ID. Again, I've called it Workout Watch. Make sure that you enable iCloud support and associate the container that we just created. I've used Xcode 6 onward support, which includes CloudKit support. Not that we're using it, but I figured, why bother with Xcode 5 backwards compat. So there you can see the association that I've set up. The next thing you need to do is create the provisioning profile. I've created one for both development and ad hoc distribution, but just development would be fine if that's all you want. So here we have it, Workout Watch development, and make sure you associate it with the correct app ID, with your certificate, and with your device. And then once you've got that, you can start up Xcode, go into the preferences, make sure your Apple ID is added here. If you're getting an error message here saying you've not got anything, so I can't remember what the exact error message is, but if you're getting an error message here, it can help to just remove the existing Apple ID and add it back in. And you should see here your details, and then when you click View Details, you should be able to see your provisioning profile in this list. With that done, you can go into Xamarin Studio, edit your entitlements plist to enable iCloud with the correct container ID, and then make sure in your project settings here you've got the correct bundle identifier, and here you should also see the correct profile, but you shouldn't have to select it manually. You just leave it as automatic. Just as long as you can see it there, then you should be good. Okay, cool. So with all that in place, we should now be able to run the app on the device with iCloud access. I've just done that just to make sure it's working, and it did, but I then realized that we forgot to fill this in, so it's created a blank document, which is fine. But let me start this up and show you it running on the device. So there you can see that we're running, and it's successfully loaded, although it's loaded nothing, so it doesn't show anything. So what I've done is I've located the cloud document on my Mac. The easiest way to find this, by the way, is just to search for that name in Finder. As you can see, it is blank. So if I add a new exercise here, I'm just going to call it exercise program, sorry. If I call it program 1, let's just add 2. And I'm going to save this, and hopefully it should appear on my iPad, although it's not instantaneous. It does take, up to a minute or so. There you go, you can see them now. Now hopefully you can see as well that they've both got a 0 duration, and the color scheme looks decent actually. I'm pretty happy with that. So if I select program 2, getting actually nothing happening. So there's obviously some a bug in the code there. So let's have a look at that. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think we hooked up the navigation requests in our host view. Nope. So let's do that when we load. And try that again. Okay, inexplicably now it's not loading the document. Okay, I've tracked down that bug to a race condition. In our exercise document service, it was previously using a standard subject. So if the initial document got published before any observers got set up, then that was kind of lost. So I've changed it to a behavior subject, so it always republishes the initial document, or sorry, the latest document to any new subscribers, and I've just defaulted it to null because you have to provide a default value to publish. And consequently, this documents from the cloud will filter out any nulls. Now that seems to have rectified the problem, so that's cool. So if we try running that again, okay, so now we can see the documents. If I touch, say, program 2, you can see that it does go into a new view, although we can't see our text there. I guess that's just because it's the wrong color or something like that. So if I hit the exercise programs back button at the top, we do go back, although it hasn't deselected for some reason. So that's an interesting problem there. Let's have a look why it's doing that. It should be executing this when we go back, but it's not. I think I know why. I've had this issue before. I think the host view controller needs to explicitly add the child view controller. Otherwise, kind of iOS doesn't really know about the child, so it doesn't execute its normal life cycle implementation. So let me try that. So now, when I go back, it does deselect the previous selection, as we had hoped. So that's cool. So one more thing I want to try just before we wrap up this video is changing the duration of one of the programs, just so that we can see that the duration there is actually working. So if I do one set, I don't know, 10 reps, and all I do is before each rep I wait 2 seconds, we would expect that to be 20-second duration program. Oops, so you can see I made a mistake there. I forgot to put in an exercise name, like that. And whoops, I've made another mistake. You'd think I'd know my own syntax here. Okay, so there we go. Now it's loaded, and you can see program 1 there has now got the correct duration of 20 seconds. So I think we'll leave it at that for this video. I think that's a sufficient implementation of our exercise programs view. So I will see you in the next video. Bye.